Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon. This is John Suntress. It's the preamble before the show begins, and I'm always happy to give you some show notes. If you have questions, comments, or requests from me, email john@wordballoon.com. It's the best way to reach me. Not Facebook messages, not Twitter messages. Email john@wordballoon.com. Follow me on Facebook under my name, John Suntress, and the Word Balloon Network. Follow me on Twitter @JohnWordBalloon. I have a YouTube channel that is up and running and has videos, and I would like you to be a part of it as well. Would you mind subscribing? It's free. I should say it's under Word Balloon. So check that out. And as always, thank you for listening to the commercials before the show starts. I know that people get annoyed by commercials, but they do pay the bills and they do make a difference in my bottom line. And the only way I get paid is if you do listen to the spots. So in advance, thank you for listening. There might be one more spot before we get started, and then we'll be underway with the show. But as always, thank you for your attention. Hey everybody, welcome back to Word Balloon, and welcome to the weekend. It's John Suntress. Really excited about today's episode. It's Chris Gage. It's been forever since I've talked to one of my fellow Greeks. Man, it's always fun seeing Chris at cons and talking to him at panels and also here on the podcast. And it's been far too long, and he's done a lot since we've talked. I don't know if you knew this, but Chris was on the writing staff of Netflix Daredevil in the first season. One of the best seasons, frankly, of the Marvel Netflix experience. And Chris has a lot of stories, behind-the-scenes stuff. And it's very interesting as we transition to Marvel going to Disney Plus and some of the product that's coming as far as the new programming and stuff. It's interesting to look back at some of the successes that Marvel has had in television, and particularly in the streaming world and on Netflix. So we talk about that, of course. Chris has been co-writing Iron Man along with a regular collaborator, Dan Slott, and they got big plans coming up for next year. Arno Stark, yes, Iron Man's brother, the Iron Man of 2020, a concept that came alive in the 80s when it was the far future. God, I remember when 2020 was the far future as opposed to next to tomorrow. But the good news is, man, I'll tell you, it sounds like Dan and Chris have great plans as Arno takes his brother's place and becomes the Iron Man of 2020. And like I said, it was kind of a future shock story back in the day. What could be happening as you make it a modern story? They've planted the seeds. They've been planting them for years. And the fruit bears next year. We get a bit of a sneak peek with Chris about that. Also, man, we talked about so much stuff and collaborating with Dan and other things that Chris has been working on, video games and the like. The most popular Marvel, the most popular video game, the number one video game of last year, was written by Chris, and he talks about that. But then the next day, after we wrapped up the conversation, Marvel drops the announcement that there's going to be a Gwen Stacy solo series set in the 616. This isn't Spider-Gwen. This isn't Gwenpool. This is Amazing Spider-Man, his first love, Gwen Stacy, who, as we remember, and you know the Spider-Man universe, Gwen's father was Captain Stacy, the police captain, and she really had this, the potential for having her own adventures, and maybe she was having her own adventures while Peter was swinging around the city. Who knew? And Chris talks about that. It's a new series with Todd Nauck. We got him for about another 10 minutes to kind of describe what was going on with the Gwen Stacy series, which he describes as a kind of Veronica Mars adventure series set in the early days of the Spider-Man universe, but very much Gwen's own story. It's an excellent idea. Gwen's always been a great character, and again, having this pedigree of being the police captain's daughter. Maybe she was a crime fighter herself. Maybe she was out there in a very street clothes kind of way, stumbling into mysteries and problems. And again, there were plenty of plainclothes or non-powered villains in the Spider-Verse that could come across Gwen Stacy as well. Sounds like a lot of fun. It's going to be a mini-series, and hopefully if it works out and people like it, it might be an ongoing series. I think it's an excellent idea. And so I had to call Chris back, and I literally caught him in between errands running around L.A., and said, hey, man, can I just get 10 more minutes about Gwen Stacy? It would suck to release this without it. Oh, yeah, no problem. So from his car in a parking lot, Chris describes Gwen Stacy for us on the wrap-up to today's episode. Christos Gage, I'm welcoming him back, and I'm welcoming back some great Marvel talk on today's Word Balloon. It's all brought to you by the League of Word Balloon listeners. Thank you greatly, League, via Patreon and your wonderful support. As the holidays come, I thank you very much, and I'm very thankful as we go into Thanksgiving week of the support I'm getting from the patrons. In fact, they are getting access to a Matt Fraction episode days before its release. Only the patrons. That's less than 300 people out there. I'm taking a head count of the current patrons. They're the only ones that have access to this 2-hour-plus conversation with Matt Fraction that eventually the rest of the Word Balloon listeners will get. But the League gets it first because of their support via Patreon. So, if that is an incentive, that's really the goal, and we're very close to reaching $1,000 a month. Once I reach that, patrons will get advance access to Word Balloon interviews, and I'm cranking them out. And as I do, you guys will get the first chance to, and women, will get the chance to hear them. So thank you very much, League of Word Balloon listeners. If you want to subscribe to Word Balloon, there's more content coming as well. Patreon.com/wordballoon. That's the direct Patreon page. Or click on the Patreon ad on the front page of wordballoon.com. But thank you greatly for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Word Balloon is also brought to you by Aftershock Comics. Now, Aftershock, we've been talking about them for over a year now because they've got great books with great creators. Some of your favorite people in comic books make books for Aftershock. People like my dear friends Tim Seeley and Phil Hester and Cullen Bunn, and great new acquaintances that I hope to get to know better in the weeks and months ahead, like Marguerite Bennett, the great Joe Pruitt, who's been, I think, one of my favorite editors to kind of sniff around and get wonderful talent to work for the various companies he's represented over the years, and these days it's Aftershock. Well, we're talking about great books, man. Things like Dark Red from Tim Seeley and Corin Howell. That is his excellent stories about Chip Iswich. Chip is a vampire living in the Midwest, and it's not as easy, surviving and living the vampire life when you live in the flyover states. And that's what the series is about, and it's a lot of fun. It's Dark Red, trade paperback volume 1, collecting the first 5 issues, available from Aftershock. There is Dark Ark from Cullen Bunn and Juan Doe, and these are the adventures of Shrey's Ark, a brand new series during the biblical times of Noah and the like, and what the challenges are. It wasn't just Noah's boat. This was the other ark that was out there after the flood. And it's the second volume of their amazing story. Then there's Animosity, Volume 2, Year 2, Marguerite Bennett, Raphael de la Tour. This is the collected volume of the second year of Animosity, a big hit for Aftershock and those creators. Donny Cates' Baby Teeth with Gary Brown. They're the co-creators of Baby Teeth. Volume 3 is available now, collecting issues 11 through 15. Also, the current issue of Baby Teeth, number 17, available this month through Aftershock Comics. Some of the wonderful books that are available now for you to check out from Aftershock. Go to their website and find out more about the Aftershock line. You'll find full story descriptions, preview pages, and the diamond codes on these books to order through your local shop at AftershockComics.com. All right, without further ado, I'm always embarrassed when I have a friend on, and it has been years since he's been on Word Balloon. It just happens sometimes, really, and Chris is no exception to this. I've always been a fan of his work. The entire Suntress family is a fan of the entire Gage's family output, not only Chris's work, but his wonderful father, Nick, who's an excellent writer as well, and given us amazing books like Eleni, and that even have become film products and stuff, and Nick is still out there cranking out books, as is his son. So it's a pleasure to welcome Chris, though, the Gage family member whose work I'm most fond of, especially when it comes to the comic book world and the comic book genre. Chris Gage, back on Word Balloon. All right, one of my favorite Greeks in comics, but also just a great guy in general, Christos Gage. Chris, welcome back to Word Balloon, man. Great to have you back.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been too long.
Embarrassed about how long it's been, honestly, because you've done so many cool things, comic-related, if not comic-direct, in these last few years since you've been on. But first of all, let's talk about the now. You and Slaughter co-writing Iron Man.
Yes, that's right. We are co-writing Tony Stark Iron Man, which ends with issue 19, and then we are co-writing Iron Man 2020, which Pete Woods is drawing, and it's just beautiful, just a beautiful book. and that's going to be really cool because it's, I'm sure you remember back in the 80s when the Tom DeFalco, Barry Windsor-Smith, Herb Trimpe miniseries came out, Machine Man, and introduced the Iron Man of 2020, and now it is 2020, and so, of course, there's an Iron Man 2020 series, and Dan's got a really cool take on it, and it's just a real pleasure to work with all those guys.
It is so much fun, all of these various movies and TV things that, when we get to the year 2000, XYZ, and here we are in comics, yes, with Arno Stark and the Iron Man of 2020, and
yeah.
I kind of knew. I even remember asking Axel when he was still editor-in-chief, like in the late teens, going, "Hey, man, 2020's coming. Is Arno coming?" And he's like, "Shh."
I'm sure there was always a plan for that.
Yeah, which is fantastic. But everything, man, God, Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner being set in 2019, and God, the fun they had with Back to the Future when they had the Cubs winning the World Series around the year before they actually did it. Yeah, crazy stuff, man. So yes, that's one of the cool things about being an older nerd is like, oh God, I remember when all this stuff was in the speculative future, and now here we are living it. So that's a really exciting opportunity to incorporate some of the original ideas and designs, I would assume. I haven't seen anything that Pete's drawn yet, if there have been any reveals yet of what Arno's armor is going to look like or anything, but I remember it well.
The armor is pretty closely based on the original design. I mean, Pete's obviously put his own spin on it,
sure.
And but it's still got that sort of like gear shape on the shoulders,
yes.
and it's really cool. I get a real kick out of seeing it, and I can't give away too much, but there's a lot of other fun characters showing up in the book, and I think people will enjoy it.
That's excellent, man. I remember the design, and but I don't remember the details of the story back in the 80s. Other than like you said, it was certainly tied to Machine Man's continuity. But
that sort of like gets reactivated after however many years, and after 30 years in the year 2020, and there's Arno Stark as the new Iron Man, and they battle the evil corporate Sunset Bane, and who's a character in the current Iron Man series, and so obviously we're not following the continuity of the Barry Windsor-Smith miniseries. That is its own separate, Earth, some other Earth, but
sure.
There's going to be a lot of references and stuff to it.
That's awesome, man. And now I have to ask, and it's fine if you can't answer this question because I never want to screw up anybody's story, but, will Tony be off stage during this period, or is he still part of the story?
Tony's definitely part of the story. He's not Iron Man.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, he will be part of the story, but I can't say what part.
Okay. Because honestly, and forgive the editorial here, but I honestly think that's been, air quotes, the problem with some of the swap-outs that Marvel has had in the last few years, and even DC for that matter too, where it's like, oh no, Jane Foster. I mean, that's why I always felt like Jason handled it best, where Jane Foster was Thor, but we still knew what the Odin son was doing while he wasn't Thor in the book, and his story was still happening alongside Jane's story, and it's like that's cool. And I'll be honest, I mean, I've told Bendis this. When Riri Williams became Ironheart, it's like, okay, that's fine. And yeah, Tony was around as a ghost in the machine kind of thing. But I'm like, I don't know, man. I want Tony, don't sacrifice the original. Don't sacrifice Steve Rogers to give us the Sam Wilson story. And I liked the Hail Hydra story as something different and everything. But yeah, I mean, I just, Amadeus Cho becoming the Hulk, and Bruce Banner dies for 10 minutes or, again, in comic book time, in real comic book time, a year or so, and it's like, oh, you don't want him off stage, man. You want both guys out there.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I totally hear what you're saying and generally agree with it, but there are some cases, like, for example, in Superior Spider-Man, there was a period where, like, in the original run, where Dan had basically Otto Octavius, who was in Spider-Man's body, sort of wipe out Pete, and he wasn't around for for a number of issues. But I think that in that book, it was servicing the overall story, which was about why only Pete can really be the Spider-Man. I mean, not that people like Miles Morales and, Spider-Gwen can't be perfectly good heroes, but the original Spider-Man can only be Pete, and it's not because of his powers or his power and responsibility or anything like that. It's a lot to do with who he is as a person, and when you throw in just Otto Octavius, even with all that other stuff, it doesn't work. And so that's, that there I felt like Pete was still a presence. And then even if you go back to, I remember I was so mad as a fan when Bruce Wayne got his back broken and Azrael took over as Batman because he was young and stupid, and I didn't realize this is going to go back to the way it was after a certain amount of time. But even those stories were about why he's not suited to be Batman and why Bruce has to come back at some point. So, it's all in how you do it. But yes, I think the ultimate investment that people have is in the original character. And then that's not to say you can't spin off the new character. There have been a number of War Machine series over the years.
Absolutely.
That have been really good. And there's no reason you can't do that. And now Ironheart has her own book and things like that.
100%, man. No, and again, you're right. And I think the market is kind of proven when you completely also, and again, in your case of Superior Spider-Man, the reason why I didn't bring it up was it was only a couple months, and all of a sudden Peter's consciousness was there. And it's like, yeah, guess what? I'm not dead. I'm in the back of your brain, Otto, and I'm not leaving and stuff. And it was, no, I really enjoyed Superior. And I mean, God, we go back to Thunderstrike and some of the and I'm blanking on his name, young Green Arrow. I can't remember his name right now. Shame on me.
Connor Hawke.
Connor Hawke, of course. Jesus Christ, and Kyle Rayner and stuff.
How do I remember these things?
Oh, please, Christos, come on, man. We've been reading this stuff forever, and I got probably about a decade on you. But yeah, no, this is our soap operas. Of course, we know all these people. So
I know the sad thing is the number of things I forget. Like real world things, but then I can remember Otto Octavius' father's name, Torbert.
Thank you.
It's a weird name, Torbert Octavius. I remember this stuff. It was funny because recently we were doing an issue of Tony Stark Iron Man, and he's fighting Ultron, and Dan had a reference to Ultron being made of vibranium, and I wrote in, and I wrote an email to Dan and Tom Brevoort, and I was like, I thought that Ultron was made of adamantium, but I guess that was back in the 80s, and things may have changed since then. And then Tom just wrote back, he's like, no, Chris, you're right, Dan, you're wrong. And I was like, yes, because Dan's a big continuity buff just like me, so the fact that I remembered something more correctly than he did, I was very proud of.
I understand, man. No, that's awesome. I have Star Trek experts that I'm friends with that are like master chess masters compared to me. And every now and then I'll get them and like, oh no, that was Scotty. And it's like, oh, you're right, it was Scotty. And it's like, yeah, see, no, I hear you, man. And of course, Brevoort is the ultimate continuity man. So I understand that too. Who's your editor on Iron Man?
It's Tom, and he, of course, is working with other editors like Alana Smith and Shannon Balsteros. I believe I want to look this up to make sure I'm getting it right, because I also work with the Spidey office, and I don't want to confuse the talented assistant and associate editors on those.
I understand,
books,
absolutely, and I want to talk more about what you're doing in the Spider-Man office as well. But yeah. Take your time. It's cool. Editing is our friend.
All right. Let me see here. Yeah, Alana Smith and Shannon Ballesteros. Wow. See, I actually remembered something about a human being as opposed to a fictional character.
Very good.
I don't know what's wrong.
That's
I don't know what's going on with me.
That's great, man. No, I'm very excited for the wrap-up, both of Iron Man and also the Tony as Iron Man, and, of course, the transition to Arno. Is it going to be, is it throughout the entire year? Can you say how long the Arno story
I don't know
go?
if it's been announced, so I cannot say because it may be out there. Google it. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe it's out there. Maybe it's not.
Very cool, man. No, it's exciting. And I truly, for those of us old enough, it's something we've been waiting for. And that's gonna be really great as you guys transition into this. I've talked to Dan off the air a few times about it, and with no detail as far as spoilers or stuff, but just his excitement, and also the fact that the two of you guys, once again, it's a two-hander that he's working with you to get this thing done. And this is great because honestly, I think you guys have been a very successful writing team. The times that you have come in to write with him.
I think we work well together, and we have a very much like a Jack Sprat and his wife type of situation where, like, for me, the plotting is the harder part and the scripting is the easier part, and he finds it the opposite. He finds plotting easier than scripting. So between the both of us, we get a book out on time.
That's cool, man. Is it
and
similar?
We have very similar sensibilities.
Is it similar to what you do in television in terms of being an episodic writer and stuff, and kind of going from whatever the showrunner's main thrust is?
I mean, to a degree, it is similar in that, like, for me, like when I get a plot from Dan, I then write script. So I'm writing the dialogue, and sometimes there's room for some riffing. Like, for example, one of the final issues of the first Superior Spider-Man run, he had a thing where Peter Parker had come back as Spider-Man, but Green Goblin didn't know it. He thought it was still Otto Octavius, and Dan was like, I want Pete to say a joke here that makes Osborn realize that it could only be him, but I don't have anything in mind, so see if you can come up with something. So I came up with a joke about him carrying a man purse, and Dan loved it, and like people still to this day bring that up as how much they liked it. So that's really cool. But what happens in TV on most shows is that you break the story in the room, meaning all the writers sit in there and essentially beat out the plot beats. So Act 1, this happens, this person is killed, the cops do this, the detectives do this. There's a twist. It's not really the butler. It's the groundskeeper. I don't know. And so essentially when you go off to write the script, you've got a plot worked out. And again, there's room to riff and to put things in. And there's a lot of specifics that aren't worked out. Like it'll say, your beat sheet will just say things like, and actually before you do that, you go off and write an outline as a writer or a writing team where you flesh out what's on the board. But you've got the basic beats on the board. So there is some degree of similarity to that.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you, man. We're going to talk more about your TV work in just a moment or two. And, it's funny mentioning Superior Spider-Man and audience reaction to a couple specific beats of yours. Now that it is so far in the past and stuff, do you get more compliments on the story? Because certainly I know it angered fans for a while when, again, they hey, man, we want to read Peter. We don't want to read Otto and stuff. Again, being an older fan never bothers me when they.
Hello.
Hey, man, I guess the call dropped.
Yeah, it was weird. It was very sudden.
Yeah. All right, no problem, man. Well, I'll ask you my question that I just asked again. Okay. What is the fan reaction nowadays, now that it's in the past, Superior Spider-Man? Is it mostly positive, or do you still get guys, I never liked that?
It's mostly positive. I mean, mostly you get people who talk about, and there are a fair amount who will say when this first storyline first started, I was really mad.
Sure.
And then by the end of it, I really liked it. And the funny thing is I just did a 12-issue Superior Spider-Man storyline, which had Otto Octavius in a clone body being a hero, and that one ended with him, spoiler alert, going back to being classic Doc Ock. So he's now back in the Marvel Universe as classic Doc Ock, and there were a lot of people who were really upset because they were like, you did all this great character development, and it's all out the window. And I was like, well, it was almost kind of planned. At some point, he's going to go back to being Gagae, the original Superior Spider-Man. At some point, he was going to go back to being, at some point, Pete was going to go back to being Spider-Man.
Right.
So, but on the other hand, it's also up to whoever writes him next, how much of it he remembers or how much it affected him. So it's the nature of when you're telling stories with characters that are company owned. At some point, Batman is Bruce Wayne. So if he's replaced by Azrael or Dick Grayson or whoever, at some point he's going to be Bruce Wayne again.
Yep.
It's just going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to accept it and tell the best stories you can with that.
Sure, man, and have the emotional punch when you are killing off a character. And I always point to Hickman's run on Fantastic Four where Johnny Storm dies, the Human Torch, and there are some sad and really powerful emotional beats because you have to treat it like, no, he's dead, and then for now we're going to treat it like it's a thing. But like you said, a couple years down the line, it's inevitable, and Otto is too interesting of a character to completely abandon. The only one that I know of in the Spider-Verse, I believe still, is the original Kraven. And
no, he's back. He's back.
Oh, really? The old man's back? Because I know for a while the son was running around. So
the original Kraven.
Wow.
It's been for a few years now. I think under Steve Wacker, he was like there was some sort of mystic ritual, and he was resurrected, and he's back.
There you go, man. No, so pretty much now just Uncle Ben is the only one left because even Gwen lives on in alternate universes as Spider-Gwen and Deadpool Gwen or whatever, that Gwenpool and all that stuff, which is hilarious. But no, it's great stuff, and I know we'll talk a little Spider-Verse in a second. But let's talk about it now. You got a cool one-shot coming up from the Spider-Verse?
Yeah, so there's a Spider-Verse series coming out now. The first couple issues have already come out, but each issue is from a different creative team, and it stars Miles Morales going from one world to another. And in mine, he goes to Spider-Man Noir's world, and those who read my Spider-Geddon miniseries will recall that we killed Spider-Man Noir in that. So this answers the question of, wait a second, why is he alive and about to get his own new series? It's beautifully drawn by Juan Ferreira, who is doing a sort of an ink wash thing where Spider-Man Noir's world is all blacks and grays, and Miles Morales is like the only splash of color, except for certain other key things that show up as red or something like that. So it's really a beautiful looking book, and I think people will really, really enjoy it.
That's outstanding, man. Have they announced the team for the Spider-Man Noir ongoing?
Yes, and I can't remember who it is.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's not you, man, but all right.
No, I have a very full plate, so I am perfectly happy with what I'm doing. But yeah, let me see if I can look it up. I want to say it's Margaret Stoll, but I don't know.
Oh, wow, cool. That's great, man, as we're talking. And yeah, I'm so... the animated movie was so great. I'm glad they're doing a sequel. And I'm so glad that these Spider-Verse tangents got a second life in the animated film. And as if obviously is only encouraging fan interest to pursue these other Spider-Men and women further in their own books and stuff. And I think it's great. And yeah, Spider-Man Noir, I liked all the noirs. I liked the Luke Cage one as well. The Iron Man one I thought was really interesting. And I'm glad that the Spider-Man one is getting a third life, I suppose, after the animated movie now. Yeah,
no, it's really cool. And it is indeed Margaret Stoll writing it, and I believe one is continuing as the artist, so that's cool. Really exciting because his work is just really beautiful. I think people are gonna flip over it.
I'm anticipating kind of was it Guy Davis who did Sandman Mystery Theater back in the day? Yeah,
kind of, but also with a little bit of a he's doing sort of an ink wash process, so there's almost a little bit of that. I don't know if you remember the Warren magazines when some of the artists would really dive into the ink wash, and like even Ditko and Alex Toth, some of those guys who had been around for a long time, but really got to go nuts with the ink wash on the Warren books. And so it's going to have that element to it too, and there's some preview art online already for people to check out. It's really awesome.
I'm going to do that. That's great. Speaking of Warren, quick tangent. Did you read Bill Shelley's James Warren book?
I don't think so. I read the comic book artist history of the Warren comics, but no, I did not read it.
It's great.
Good?
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's so sad. He died just a couple months after it came out, Bill Shelley.
Oh.
And but it's a tremendous history of Warren. And, in fact, I'll let you know and the Word Balloon listeners know, I want to get Bruce Jones on to talk about his days. Yeah, me too, man. There's another guy like you that, although he dabbled in television, you're certainly working much more in television and stuff. But, I've always appreciated both his comics and his TV work as well. So, and for people who don't...
He was one of the best short story writers ever in comics. Some of his stuff for Creepy and Eerie, and then his Alien Worlds and Twisted Tales for Pacific Comics.
Oh, yeah.
And then for Vertigo, he did some stuff for Flinch, that anthology series, horror anthology. And he's really just, you give him 6 pages and he will give you a story that is like packed full of stuff and has a beginning, middle, and end and twists and turns. And I'm like, how the hell does this guy do that? It's really, really remarkable. I remember this one story for I think it was Creepy or Eerie, and it's drawn by Russ Heath so beautifully, where this guy comes home from work and he kills his wife, and then he kills his kid, and then he gets in a car with his secretary and they go to a motel and have sex, and you're like, oh, this is a story about a horrible guy who murdered his family so he could run out with his secretary, and then they're sitting in a car overlooking the city, and she's like, I don't think I can go through with it. And he goes, okay. And he kills her too.
Jesus.
And then he watches the bombs go off as nuclear war hits. Like, he was working at some government facility, and he knew a nuclear war was coming, basically. So he was sparing his family the
horror,
the pain of the nuclear, dying in a nuclear holocaust. And,
wow.
It was really, really cool.
Wow.
Anyway, he's always done some really terrific stuff, and I'm just a huge fan of his. And he also, the funny thing is, if you're a fan of Richard Corbin, as I am,
yes, indeed.
Richard Corbin used him as a model a lot. So many of Corbin's protagonists look exactly like Bruce Jones.
I had no idea. That's amazing. Yeah, no, he's a good-looking dude. He totally could be leading man of different stories and stuff. I could see that. And then
I always get mad at comic book creators, especially writers for some reason, who are good-looking. It just shouldn't be allowed. They should look like me.
Stop it. That's Chris. I'd be happy if I looked like you. Don't kid yourself. And I am happy with I'm comfortable in my own skin. For people who don't know Bruce Jones, also he did in the early 2000s the run of the Hulk that really kind of reinvigorated the book and was the premise for the Ed Norton Hulk movie. They really took a lot from Bruce's run of that. So Bruce, very significant comic book writer. And, so looking forward to having him on in the weeks or months ahead on Word Balloon.
And he also wrote for the HBO TV show The Hitchhiker, which I love. Because there's guaranteed boobs in every episode.
Yes, I know. It's true. That's so funny, and you're right, man. I remember talking to Nunzio De Filippis and Christina Weir, another husband and wife writing team, and they were telling me about when they wrote for Arliss on HBO. And they're like, we even in the 90s, it was like, we had to throw some scenes in where there's some boobs and stuff. And Bruce on The Hitchhiker, it was, early 80s HBO horror anthology series. And, it was, hey, man, they were pulpy stories, and pulpy stories sometimes have smut in them and stuff. That's just the way it is, or was.
It's funny because when I was very early in my Hollywood career, I had the chance to talk to Peter Bogdanovich. He was going to do he was going to direct an adaptation of one of my father's books that I had written the screenplay for, and it fell apart, as things often do in this town. But Peter was telling me about his early days working for Roger Corman, and he said that it was great education because the way Roger Corman would work is, he'd come to you and he'd say, okay, you can do anything you want, but I've got a circus set I need to tear down in a week. You need to use that so we're not wasting money on it. I've got 10 minutes of stock footage of biplanes in a dogfight. You need to use that. And I owe so-and-so a picture, so you need to use him.
Yep.
And I need boobs every 20 minutes, or whatever. But other than that, you could do whatever you want. And so you have to take these diverse pieces and put something together that's a story around them. And that is such a great exercise as a writer to, it fits so many things. I can't tell you how many times, I'll get a call and it's like, we're doing this event. So one of my first big Marvel comics was the Iron Man Captain America Civil War one-shot.
Yes.
Which I actually have a fun story about. I'll tell you in a minute. But, I got a call and Andy Schmidt, who was working in Tom Brevoort's office at the time, said, so basically Civil War is being delayed. I believe it was that Mark Miller had, he has Crohn's disease and he had a bout with it and it slowed him down. And we need to put something out, and we want to put out sort of a one-shot explaining how it's possible for Captain America and Iron Man, who've been friends and allies for so long, to, get to this point where they're at war. Do you think you could do that? And I was like, oh, sure. And I rattled off a bunch of things from their history that I could cite. And he was like, okay, great, do it. And I wrote it in, very short time and handed it in, and they made very minimal changes to it. But, there's so many times when people call you up and they're like, I need something that will do this, this, and this. And those things might not seem to, be basically your job as a writer is to come up with a way to make that a compelling story. And if you can do that, you'll work fairly regularly because it's a necessary skill in a lot of situations. And it also helps in situations like in TV, for example, when, something will happen, like you lose a location and they're like, okay, this was going to be, in a drugstore, but now we have, a greeting card store instead. Make it work.
Sure. Yeah.
And you've got to figure out a way to do it. So that is, it also helps when you write video games, by the way, because there are a lot of times when, you have to, like, a lot of writing video games is, 50 different ways for the main character to say, I need to go over there. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
You're trying to prompt the player to do a certain thing or give them a clue or give them a hint. And you've got to come up. It can't all be, I need to go over there. It's got to be like, I really should go over there. It's like, there's something interesting looking over there. And you've just got to come up with, so you've got to be really flexible. And if you can do that, if you can develop that skill early, it's extremely, I find, when you're not as talented as the Alan Moores and the Brian K. Vaughns of the world, so being useful helps.
I understand. No, that's great, man. And I want to hear your Cap Iron Man story, but for people who like to literally see a great example of what Chris is describing, watch Peter Bogdanovich's late 60s movie Targets, where... That's the one he was talking about. Yeah, where Corman owed Boris Karloff, Karloff owed Corman 2 days of shooting. So, yes. Bogdanovich was doing this story about a sniper who's just randomly killing people, picking them off highways and things like that. But he needed to incorporate, he got the ability to use Karloff in the movie, but also incorporate some footage from a Karloff Jack Nicholson movie called The Terror, I want to say, and then include some of that. So, like you said, Bogdanovich had to come up with this story that made sense. And he did. And was there a circus in it, or like a Ferris wheel or something? There was something like that. Now, I can't remember that specifically, but I do know that, Karloff was just very meditative about how horror movies were changing, and, he didn't understand today's horror compared to the classic years and stuff. And it really is this very elegant solution to putting all these random elements together and making a story. And it was this incredible story. But sadly, it came out in 1968, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated and Martin Luther King was assassinated, so it really kind of killed the film as far as theatrical releases. But it's Bogdanovich's first great film, and absolutely worth seeing. And that's the thing. Corman is known for his schlock, but every now and then, like that and the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, where Corman Productions, where it's like, these are great movies. And it's like,
Yeah,
you know, and I mean,
and
what
the
he was
people
doing.
who he gave their start to, you know, I mean, Scorsese and, you know,
Joe Dante,
I mean, everybody.
Yeah. Oh no, it's a lot
Jim
of
Cameron, I think.
Yes, lots of great, and still to this day is giving great young filmmakers a shot, and with these same parameters of, hey, this is the budget. And I remember hearing Ron Howard say, you know, he gave him like for a car chase movie like 40 extras, and he's like, you know, I really need like 60. And he goes, Ron, let me make a promise to you. You're only going to get 40 extras, but if you do this right, you'll only have to work with me this once. You know, and it's like, and you're going to be a great filmmaker, and you're never going to have to worry about this shit again. But for this job, sorry, this is what we got. You're going to have to make it work. And that's you know,
awesome.
that's
and
great,
I bet
man.
Ron Howard would tell you that figuring out how to make 40 extras look like 60 served him well, even to this day when he's got, you know, $100 million budgets.
Absolutely, man. No, I think Corman is an incredible person to observe and hear when he's in interviews and read his autobiography and all the people that have worked for him, the stories they have and stuff. Fascinating shit, and it doesn't surprise me that it is helping you. Now, back to your Captain America Iron Man story.
Oh, so it was recently announced at New York Comic Con, in fact, that I had the pleasure of contributing writing to the Iron Man virtual reality video game coming out from Sony.
Wow.
I want to say in February. And it was funny because I came in, they obviously, the production company, Camouflage, they have been working on it for years. I mean, these games are in development for years. And then I sort of came in and you know, I was going to do some, you know, dialogue polishing and sort of adding some Marvel Easter eggs and stuff like that. Cool. And, you know, I don't know how they felt, but if it was me, I'd be like, who is this person coming in and messing up, you know, my carefully constructed everything. But then the guy, the head writer on it was like, I just want to tell you something that I just figured out. He said, when we first started this game, I came up with a bunch of comics for our writing team to read to really understand Iron Man. And it was like, you know, Extreme is the Warren Ellis storyline. It was Demon in a Bottle, you know, this and that. But one of them was my Iron Man Captain America one shot. And he was like, so we're really glad to have you on board. And I was like, oh, good. That makes things a lot easier. And it means that they won't see me as some sort of interloper, which would be totally fair. And it's been a really fun experience. And I just think that it's so, Iron Man is such the perfect character for VR because you're in the armor, like it's almost like, you know, and we've all spent years seeing Robert Downey Jr. in that face mask with the heads-up display and everything. But like, what is more perfect than, you know, the problem with VR games, from what I understand, is that people say you're on a rail, meaning like obviously you can't be running around your living room bumping into the walls. So you kind of there have to be ways where you know, restrict your movement. But if you're Iron Man, you're flying by means of your repulsor. So it's like you aim your hand down, the repulsor shoots you up, you know. Hilarious. I mean, I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but perfect. And the early people who played it have said, wow, this is really like, they revolutionize VR games. And, you know, it's true. And I'm really excited to be a part of it. They've got some great people involved. The guy who plays Tony also, I got to hang out with him a little bit at New York Comic Con, and he also played Electro in the Spider-Man video game that I worked on. And it's fun. He does different voices, and he was like, "Oh yeah," and he goes, "How do you like my new suit?" And I was like, "Oh my god, you Electro," and it was really cool.
So does he imitate Downey's voice?
No, he's not. And much like, you know, he didn't imitate Downey's voice. He's just doing a sort of a suave, you know, Tony Stark type of thing. Yeah. And with Electro, it was funny because he said, I actually modeled Electro's voice after an electrician who came to do some work on my house. And he had this like Brooklyn, New York sort of like, you know, blue collar, you know, regular working guy accent that he thought was perfect. And he's like, and then he was like, he's an electrician too. So I'm going to use his voice for Electro. And it all worked out quite nicely. But.
That's hilarious. So for the Iron Man VR game, is Are there going to be like venues where you can go and do it, or do you have to obviously have the gear and it's a game that you? I mean, because it's all brand new to me. So go on.
It's only somewhat less brand new to me. I believe it's something you have at home. Like you buy. Now I've got a regular PlayStation. I don't have the VR thing where you put the helmet on and things on your hands. But I believe it's a home game, and I think it's going to be just something you buy and play at home. I mean, there are at certain conventions. I think they've had or like game expos.
Yeah, like
have
demos,
displays where people can go and play it. Yeah. But no, I think it's a home thing.
All for home, man. I'll tell you. And again, let's reach back for another old movie that now is coming to reality: Lawnmower Man. Back in the day,
yeah, Lawnmower Man. Yeah, and what was that one Natalie Wood's last movie? Brainwave or something?
Yes, with Walken. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dreamscape or Brainwave? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, there was a movie called Dreamscape that I quite enjoyed.
Yeah, Dennis Quaid and Eddie Albert.
This was called something else. Brainstorm.
Brainstorm or Brainwave. Yeah. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. And you're right. It was Natalie Wood's last movie, and Christopher Walken is in it as well. Very cool. I know. Crazy. Here we are. Future shock.
We're really appealing to the young people with this particular.
I know, they're like, get over it. Okay, boomer. I'm sure they're all screaming that right now to us right now.
I am not a boomer.
Neither am I, man. I know. Yeah, it's bad news, kids. We're Gen X.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't afford to buy a house either. So there.
I know, dude. I'm telling you. I realize. I feel so. I truly. This is going to sound, condescending, but really, I hear 20-somethings and they're like, I got a mountain of student loan debt, and it is much bigger than what we had. But still, it's like, so did we. And I'm not in my career. It's like, that's your 20s, man. I mean, we on a smaller scale, but we were still in debt and still not in our jobs. And our 20s was working a bunch of bullshit jobs that had nothing to do with what our ambitions were career-wise. But that's what you got to do, man. And I hope it gets better, and I can only hope that government makes it better.
I'll tell you what I did in my 20s. I sold comics on eBay.
Sure.
I attempted to sell my semen to a cryobank.
Were you rejected? You attempted.
It's not as dirty as it sounds. It's what?
You were rejected. What is it? I'm sorry, your semen's not good enough.
I was initially accepted, but then they rejected me because there was too many. The white blood cell count in my semen was too high. Apparently, it's not a desirable thing. It means you could be sick or have an infection or something. But first, they accepted me, and I was like, I know they look for Ivy League graduates, and I went to Brown. So I went in, and they were like, they ran all these genetic tests on me, and I don't have various genetic diseases, so it was good to find that out. And then they were like, all right, basically, here's a cup, there's a room with some porno movies in it, and then go do your thing. And I was like, this is something I believe I'm qualified to do. And then they were like, you got too many white blood cells. But it's funny because I was recently bringing this up when Ruth and I were working on Hawaii Five-0.
Okay.
And a guy who's much younger than me, who's probably like 20 years younger than me or so, who was on the show. So he was like, oh, I see. He said, when I was a little bit younger and poor, I tried to do that too. And he's like, but I'm 5'8". And he's like, if you're under 5'10", they do not want you. I was like, you're kidding, because you think that, obviously they're not going to discriminate about certain things like your ethnicity or whatever, but the height, I guess people just don't want
short kids.
a sperm donor who's under 5'10".
That's hilarious.
So,
well, that's
there you go. I'm exactly 5'10". So. But my white blood cells count really got me out of the business. So
that's hilarious.
I had to.
All right, kids, another good tip.
Mm-hmm.
If you're short, don't try to sell your sperm. It ain't going to work. That's awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
Very funny. Well,
But no, it's. I mean, I had. I remember, I started buying original comic art in like the early 2000s, and then my wife got actually misdiagnosed with cancer.
Oh wow!
But we had to have all these tests, and we had very poor insurance at the time, and we racked up these medical bills, and I had to sell stuff that now is worth a fortune. I mean, I got good money for it at the time, but like I had a John Byrne Terry Austin X-Men page.
Wow.
I had a bunch of I had a Luke Cage Power Man cover by Gil Kane.
Jesus.
And, I look at what these things are going for now, and it's like, damn, I had to sell that stuff for just a little bit above what I paid for it.
Sure.
And if I'd been able to hold on to it, maybe I could buy a house now, but
holy cow.
Hell no.
Yeah. No, I understand, man. So many of I don't have a lot of original art pages, but I have a lot of commission pieces. And same thing, early 2000s. And, I got great pieces for under $100 that are all over my walls and everything. Beautiful frame pieces that I love.
Yeah.
But I know now that, they're worth a few $100, if not a couple $1,000, depending on the artist. Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
It's insane. No, it's very insane. Well, all right, so we're on the video game world, so tell me about your work on, and give me the title of your Spider-Man video game.
It was called Marvel Spider-Man, and it came out last year. It recently became the #1 selling superhero game of all time.
Outstanding.
And it was a lot of fun. That was one where instead of coming in like towards the end and doing polishes, I was involved in it from the very start. And I got to work with the great people at Insomniac Games and also Marvel Games and Sony. At Marvel Games, Bill Roseman is at Marvel Games now.
Oh, that's great.
He was a longtime editor, and I worked with him. He was my editor on Avengers: The Initiative and Avengers Academy, and we had a great relationship. So he was like, "Hey, do you want to work on?" It was actually funny because he called me right after Ruth and I had finished our season on Daredevil. And he was like, so I've got a couple of games if you're interested in working on them. One is an Avengers Academy game, which I thought, since you wrote the comic, you might be good for, and the other was Spider-Man. And I was like, give me Spider-Man. And I'm glad I did because it was so much fun, and the Insomniac people are so great. Insomniac is consistently rated as one of the top, like mid-sized companies or small companies to work for in the country, and they're really, really amazing. John Paquette was the lead writer, and Brian Intihar, creative director, I believe was his title. And they brought in me and Dan could only work on the early plotting stages, but I worked on it for 3 years.
Wow.
And had so much fun. And they have this thing where J. Jonah Jameson does a podcast. So as you're swinging through the city, like you'll hear this J. Jonah Jameson rant. And I wrote all of those, and I had so much fun doing it because I got to channel my inner grouchy old man. It was people really dig it, and they got this amazing voice actor Darren DePaul to voice Jonah, so it worked out quite nicely.
That's great, man. Honestly, again, my age conspires against me because I have yet to be able to master working the modern PlayStation or whatever gamepad or whatever, or your console, whatever you call it these days. Whatever that thing is, the damn thing, you kids with your Frisbees and your pogo sticks. And literally, I tried to play Arkham City, Batman, and all I could do is make Batman walk in a circle. I couldn't do anything else. And I'm like, all right, I give.
Yeah.
But, I mean, honestly, the games, God, and I think back to when I started Word Balloon in 2005, and I would talk to people like Paul Jenkins, who was working on, like, a Hulk game back then. And just the level of sophistication that have come from these games in all-encompassing ways. And I love the idea that in the midst of this Spider-Man game, J. Jonah Jameson's doing a podcast. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
It was so much fun. And the game, it's really amazing what they can do in the game. It was nominated for all these awards. We got nominated for a Writers Guild Award, a BAFTA, all kinds of, and it won a bunch of awards too. And, people were really impressed with the story. And it's funny because I got a lot of comments on Twitter from people who were like, okay, like they played the game a little bit later than others. And they're like, I knew what happens at the end. And I was like, I'm not going to cry. And then it happened and I cried.
Wow.
So, it was pretty cool. And, I'm very proud of, it's funny because I've been very lucky in that the things that I've worked on for a long period of time like this, I can't imagine working 3 years on something and it comes out and it sucks. People hate it. You know what I mean? Like, that must be so depressing.
Yeah.
And the same with Daredevil. We worked on it for an entire year, season 1, and it all came out at once. And I'm like, imagine if you do that and it all comes out at once and people hate it. Like, how depressing must that be? But knock on wood, I've been pretty lucky in that people have liked this stuff. So I'm sure at some point it'll happen to me, and probably get really depressed and grudgy.
I understand.
Which is not hard for me to do.
I understand. Are we okay for time? Because I do want to get into the TV stuff and everything.
We can talk about the TV stuff, yeah.
Okay, good. Because, man, let's talk about that season of Daredevil in particular to start off with. Because, especially now that, Disney Plus is going to get underway and they've laid out their slate of the Marvel shows that are coming up, and we're certainly all excited about The Mandalorian starting, I think, this week, in fact.
Yep.
But, man, I'll tell you, that Daredevil show in particular, of all the Netflix Marvel shows, so groundbreaking and so terrific and evocative of, that great Daredevil Man Without Fear story that Ramita and Frank Miller did, for the comics and stuff, but really was its own thing and fleshed out the world in such a perfect way. Great casting, amazing writing, and such a wonderful experience to watch. So, yeah, like you say, you worked for a year on it and stuff. You had a great showrunner. Was it Stephen DeKnight?
Yeah, well, we actually started out with Drew Goddard.
Okay.
And then partway, I think it was 3 months in, he got a invitation to go direct a movie. He had always, it was actually going to be a Sinister Six movie in the Sony Spider-Man universe, and it never ended up coming about.
Yeah.
But he was always going to direct it, and then they shuffled their schedule around, and then he had to go direct it sooner than originally planned. But he helped bring in Stephen DeKnight, who they both worked, of course, on for Joss Whedon on the Buffy shows.
Yep.
And so they came from the same school. They're good friends. And so Stephen picked up the baton and really, brought his own stuff to it. And it was just, both of those guys are geniuses and did such an amazing job. And I remember, there is no bigger fan of the comics than Drew. And he had Bill Sienkiewicz from Daredevil, Love and War all over the wall.
Oh, I love that book.
But at the same time, he said, he always used to say, I don't want us to do karaoke, meaning I don't want to just do a frame for frame, adaptation of the book, which, let's face it, you can't do anyway, because Daredevil didn't fight the Kingpin until the character had been around for 20 years.
Absolutely. That's
you know
right.
what I mean? So, and of course everyone wants to see him fight the Kingpin. So, Drew was very smart, I thought, in saying, we're doing our own thing. We're honoring what came before and respecting it. But our job is to make the best Daredevil TV show we can make. And we've tried to bring that attitude to the Spider-Man video game. We love the comics, we love the movies, but we're trying to make the best Spider-Man video game we can make. And so I think that's partly why it turned out so well, is because you had people who, it wasn't one of these situations where it's we're going to take the name of this IP and just ignore everything and just do our own thing. No, it's not that. These are people who love and respect the source material, but also recognize that you're doing something unique and on its own, and you have to figure out how best to do that. So, that was that was great. And as a matter of fact, Ruth and I were covering set. For most shows, when your episode that you wrote is shooting, you are covering set, meaning you're there as the on-set writer and to respond, deal with any questions about the script or last-minute rewrites, you're the loop. You communicate with the showrunner if anything's going on that needs his or her attention. And so we were covering set on the day that Bill Sienkiewicz and David Mack visited the set, and it was so cool to see them meet Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. And Vincent was so excited, and he was like, he said to Bill Sienkiewicz, I look at your artwork before I go on set every day, and Bill was just blown away.
Oh,
and
that's great.
It was so cool because, we all know the stories of, people who, either didn't live to see their creations become movies or, for whatever reason didn't get credit for it, back in the day.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to see. It was really nice to see, people treating Bill and David like the rock stars, that they are.
Yeah, that we know they are. Absolutely, man. No, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Were there ever are you aware of any no's that came from either Marvel or Netflix in terms of, just things that Drew wanted to do or you guys wanted to do on your specific episodes or whatever that you couldn't do?
Not really. I know that there were... Well, there's all the things you can't do for budgetary reasons.
Sure,
I mean, that's just a fact of life of making TV. And in terms of like content, you know, the level of violence or whatever, you know, we settled on it's Netflix, so theoretically you can do anything, but it's also Marvel. And this was, you know, they hadn't done R-rated Marvel characters. I think they said they might now with Deadpool, but they didn't want it to be full R, so we settled on something we called PG-16, which is harder than PG-13.
Okay, yeah.
Sort of walks up to the line of R rating, but doesn't step over. But there weren't a ton. I mean, you know, there weren't a ton of like, you must do this or you must not do this.
Okay.
Like, for example, we had, you know, we had a list of characters we could use from the Daredevil universe, and you know, we could kind of pick and choose which ones we wanted. Although one of my contributions that I'm proud of is I saw that Gladiator was on there, Melvin Potter, and one of the things we were struggling with early on was, how does Daredevil's costume get made? Because in the original comic, he makes it himself. He sews it. He's blind, but he makes a costume.
Yep, I remember.
No one really asked any questions. And I said, hey, you know, in the comics, Melvin Potter makes costumes. I mean, that's his civilian job.
Right.
So I suggested, what if he's like an outfitter for some bad guy, and Daredevil saves him from, you know, whatever this guy's clutches, and he makes Daredevil's costume, and that's what we ended up doing. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome, man. And I know too from the great Frank Miller Mazzucchelli story, Born Again, when Daredevil's costume is destroyed, and Melvin is making a Daredevil costume for somebody else, and all those scenes of Matt in the shadows. And, you know, it's Matt. It's plainclothes Matt, but he's being Daredevil. And he's like, Melvin, it's okay. Make the costume. And Melvin has that smile, and he's like, always happy to see you, Daredevil. That's great. And he ends up getting the costume from him. Yeah, man. So that's
absolutely right.
That's poetic, man. No, that's beautiful. That's great.
I thought I came up with an original idea, but as usual, I'm just ripping people off who are smarter than me.
Shut up. You know you're not. No, you're repurposing it. That's great, Chris. No, you know that. That's great. So was the Gladiator your episode? Was that your episode?
No, we didn't write that one. He actually showed up in the previous episode. We wrote the episode where actually it was really cool. It was the episode where Daredevil and Kingpin fight for the first time, and he fights Nobu, the Red Ninja, who was originally going to be this character from the comic called Kirigi, who's like this immortal ninja, but we realized that like nobody who didn't know the comics would care about Kirigi, whereas we had this crime boss Nobu in the show, so we're like, let's just make him the ninja. But so we got a ninja fight, we got a fight with the Kingpin, we got a scene in the gallery where Matt Murdock goes in his civilian identity, and Kingpin shows up while he's talking to Vanessa.
Yes.
And I have to say it's funny because my wife Ruth was the only one of the writers who had not read the comics, and she was like, well, should I read the comics? And we were all like, no, you need to be our eyes and ears of the people who haven't read the comics, because we want them to understand the show too.
Yeah.
So she would say when we got too far into the weeds, like, this doesn't make any sense or whatever, but she came up with the best action parts of all the fights and the most brutal stuff, and
oh, wow.
It was great. And and she also there was a scene where Daredevil goes to talk to his priest, Father Lantham, and he's trying to reconcile whether he should try to kill Wilson Fisk. And I wrote a draft, and Ruth looked at it, and she was like, this is not, she's like, you need to actually bring in some Bible verses to this. So she found some Bible verses, and she found a real story about something that happened in Rwanda, and she put them all in, and it was really, powerful. And then Stephen DeKnight, God bless him, said, the network is going to want to shorten this. The answer is no. We're
Excellent. Yes.
We're leaving it. And it came out great. The performances were so amazing. And then it was awesome because in an article came out in I believe it was a Mormon newspaper,
oh, wow.
where the reviewer said, this is the most authentic depiction I've seen of a priest like counseling a parishioner in on television. So I was like, wow, and Daredevil of all places.
Yeah, that's incredible.
You know?
No, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Jesus. Well, and no pun intended. But also, two things. That's one of the things I love currently about streaming is, and this is something I keep hearing from all of the showrunners and writers that I talk to, in that the streaming networks understand if this episode needs to be 38 minutes, fine. If the next episode needs to be an hour and 6 minutes, fine. And you don't have that network, over-the-air network, just, sorry, this is what it is. An hour's got to be an hour, and really, an hour's got to be 39 minutes or 40 minutes to fit all the commercials and everything in. So that's great.
No, it's true. It is advantageous in that respect, yeah.
And then the other thing, and mentioning the gallery and Vanessa, that is one of the best things about the Daredevil television series to me, was the fleshing out of them meeting each other, Vanessa and Wilson Fisk, and how they fell in love. Because by the time the relationship shows up in the comics, they're already married. Vanessa is this Iron Maiden, stoic, kind of very unapproachable character. And I really felt that she came across more as a real woman in the television series, and you could see how someone would be attracted to her. And again, it makes their relationship that much more tragic.
Oh, and it was funny because we often talk about the fact that like the villain has the healthiest relationship in the entire show. But no, we definitely felt like it was important to show, to show their relationship, developing, because that's what would make people, they would see Fisk as a villain, but also as someone who they were invested in.
Sure.
He obviously really loved Vanessa, and and then it also made it that much scarier when he would just go
nuts,
squash someone's head in a car door.
Yep, 100%, man. No, this is D'Onofrio gave us such a layered Wilson Fisk, and again in the writing as well. But he delivered the message. I mean, that's that hand in hand thing, and that's why I'm always happy to talk more to writers like yourself than I am even the actors, because they're the mailman. They're delivering the message. You guys are writing the message. So you guys are really writing the character. It's hand in hand, and I do think
it's.
Go ahead, you tell me.
I have to say Vincent did a tremendous job. The actors did such a good job.
Yeah.
And Vincent is an incredibly one of the smartest actors I've had the pleasure to work with, and really understands the characters. And it was funny because he came up to Ruth and me before the gallery scene. So basically what happens with this gallery scene is Wilson Fisk has finally come out of the shadows, and he's like, I'm trying to create a better New York. And we wanted to do a scene where Charlie Cox, who plays Daredevil, could be in a scene with Vanessa, because otherwise their paths are not going to cross.
Okay.
And, we came up with this idea that Matt Murdock would say, let me go to this, this woman's his girlfriend. Let me go to the gallery and talk to her and try to get a fix on what he's up to. There's no real reason for him to do that. He's not going to get any good intelligence out of that. The scene exists because we want these actors in a room together. And then we were like, and then what if Wilson Fisk shows up while he's there, which is, of course, incredibly coincidental. And so we talked about this in the room for ages and ages, and Stephen was essentially like, very wisely, look, people aren't going to ask these questions. They're going to love seeing these actors in the room together. It's going to work. So Ruth and I wrote it, and Stephen added a nice, working with Ayelet, the actress who plays Vanessa, added a nice little exchange in there about a red painting between Matt and Vanessa. But anyway, Vincent came up to Ruth and me on the set, and he's like asking a couple questions, and he goes, there's a thread to this scene that if you pull it, the whole thing kind of unravels. And we're like, yeah, we know, we talked about it in the room. And he just smiled, and he was like, don't worry about it, I'll make it work. He's like, I just wanted to make sure you knew.
That's awesome.
We were like, oh yeah, we know.
Yeah.
And he totally made it work. And so when it aired, we were like, there were people who were waiting for this and literally live tweeted, binging the entire series. And so there was this one guy who was like, now he's in the gallery and this scene is great. And oh shit, it's Fisk, and it wasn't like, oh my God, how coincidental. Like, why did he decide to come by now? They were excited that this was happening.
Yeah.
And, it really, I learned a lot of important things, meaning one, great casting covers a multitude of sins, and B, if it makes people feel good, you can excuse a lot of hand waving and concern with you about why and how exactly it happens. So if the audience likes it, they're not going to ask a lot of questions about the mechanics of it.
That's great, man. So was it just the first season that you were on Daredevil?
Yeah, just the first season.
Okay, well that's the best season. So I mean, honestly, I think three wonderful.
Look, I'm a little prejudiced, but I happen to agree with you as well. I haven't seen the other. I say that because I actually haven't seen the other two, so I don't know. But I hear they're very good.
Well, and again, it opened the door for all these other great Marvel Netflix series, and gave the concept the credibility it needed to move forward. And man, now you're hearing that maybe Charlie Cox might come back if, in whatever ways they decide to work with the characters, either in film or TV. That would be incredible.
Yeah, that would be.
Isn't that interesting that we're in this kind of era? And certainly we're going to see it with the CW crossover that's coming up as well. But
I was about to say, you look at what Mark Guggenheim's doing with the Crisis on Infinite Earths, where he's literally bringing in actors from DC shows from 20 years ago, and
Burt Ward,
it's so cool.
Burt Ward, and even making Kevin Conroy an older Bruce Wayne is just so poetic that thank God one of the best Batman actors, albeit even on the animated show, gets to really have a moment as Bruce Wayne in this crossover. And I don't care if it's 30 seconds or 5 minutes or a whole episode. Right. That's just so great. And I'm excited in next year, at a couple conventions. I'm going to be there with Conroy and have the opportunity to talk to him even more. And God, what a great compliment. And again, I'd say the same thing about Charlie Cox if all the stars align and we get that with Daredevil. Hell, even that guy that was Constantine for that half season on NBC has been enjoying a nice little rebound career and stuff. It's like, no, we all love you, man, and I'm glad the producers are like, no, he's a great Constantine. Let's keep him in there, and things that would have been unheard of in most of our television viewing life are now possible. So that's incredible, man. It is. It's just what a time to be alive, as the old man says in The Simpsons. Exactly. In Moon Pies. So we were talking off the air about your time on Hawaii Five-0, and you got to do an episode that revolved around comics.
Yeah, so Ruth and I spent a year on Daredevil, then I spent 3 years writing the Spider-Man video game, and then we went on Hawaii Five-0 for a season. And one of the episodes we wrote was it was actually the victim was a real life superhero, like Phoenix Jones in Seattle, that type of thing.
Okay.
And one of the characters on the show, played by Jorge Garcia from Lost, is a big, nerd comic book guy. So he sort of spearheaded it, and the investigation took them to a comic shop on the island called Other Realms, which was really cool to, not only shoot in the comic shop but also use its actual name, because I'm sure people see it on the show and they're like, I'm going to check that out when I go to
Hawaii. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Hawaii, yeah. So it was cool, and then we got a lot of publishers to send us comics to use as set dressing. And
sure.
For example, I had written a Ninjak series for Valiant, and that there was a scene where Jorge's character Jerry lays a comic book at the sort of makeshift shrine to this dead beloved real life superhero, and he puts it there like, what comic should we put? And I was like, I just had used one of my Ninja comics. They did. And we got Mike Perkins, who I've worked with, terrific artist, an amazing guy.
Absolutely, you guys did that Union Jack series together. Hell yeah.
Union Jack, yeah, and we got him to do. So what happens at the end is the climactic scene transitions into comic book panels. So it plays out as comic book art at the end. And Mike drew that, so that was really cool to get to bring him in and work with him.
Excellent.
And, it was a lot of fun, and it also helped the budget because it's a lot cheaper to draw a helicopter chase than film one. And so I was talking about budget earlier. That's the kind of thing that happens.
So did they put real helicopter sound effects while you were seeing the panels and stuff like that? Or was it music or whatever?
There was a narrator who was this young lady who played the proprietor of the comic shop, and so she was reading. I got a little bit old school with the captions of captions that describe what's happening in the panel, like we used to have up until about the late 80s. And so I did some of those, and she was narrating that, so it was pretty cool.
Okay, and was that last season? What season was this?
It was season 9, so last season.
Okay, great, because I have CBS All Access because I have to watch anything that's called Star Trek, no matter what.
Okay, well there you go. You can check it out.
I have to go back and look at that episode. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. Have you done the Hawaii Comic-Con?
I never have. No.
Oh man, they got to invite you. My guy Jason Kim, who I know is listening right now, and is I think with them. If not, I know he's an ardent fan of theirs. Oh God, it'd be great to obviously your own experiences.
I think I would love. Ruth and I had our honeymoon in Hawaii. Back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and we would love to go back.
That would be great, man. That's fantastic. All right, am I forgetting anything? What else is going on with you that I'm not talking about?
Oh, there's stuff always that I can't talk about, so I can't talk about that.
Okay, no problem. What?
I don't know. I don't know what else. Oh, I've got a Annihilation one shot. So there's this sort of a 5th week Annihilation event. It's Marvel's 80th anniversary, and they're doing a lot of throwbacks to earlier stuff.
Yes.
Like Chris Claremont and Bill Sienkiewicz did an issue of New Mutants, and we're doing a mini Annihilation event, which has an Alpha and Omega issue that Matt Rosenberg is writing, and then 4 one shots that Matt's writing one, and Dan Abnett is writing one. Of course, was involved in the original Annihilation, and I was also involved at the tail end of the original Annihilation, and then Annihilation Conquest. So it was kind of cool. And mine is the Annihilation. It's called Annihilation. Well, I forget what it's called. Annihilation Scourge. The title has changed.
Okay.
But Annihilation Scourge, I think, and mine has the Fantastic Four in it.
Oh wow!
And it was a lot of fun, and it was cool because I was like, okay, this kind of is cool that I've been around long enough that they are reaching back to something that I did in the past to pay tribute to it for the 80th anniversary, and it also makes me feel really, really old.
Don't worry about it. It's all right, Chris. So it's called Scourge. Is the Scourge in it, the villain?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Justice is served. It's I don't know if I can say who the villain is.
Okay, no problem.
The one shots are FF, Silver Surfer, Beta Ray Bill, and Nova, the Richard Rider Nova.
Fantastic. Oh, that's great. That's fun. Yeah, these anniversary one-shots and little mini events have been a lot of fun. The 1000th issue was outstanding. That was fun. I forget, did you have a story in there?
I did not.
Okay, no worries. That's all right. When did they get you doing Annihilation? That's cool. And like you said, you got a full play right now. No, hey, man.
Yep.
I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled with everything you're doing, and I'm so glad that you and Ruth are doing so well with your television writing and stuff, and I certainly hope that there are more TV projects coming up as well that hopefully when they become public you'll be able to say something about, or after the fact. I know we're in this world of non-disclosures and stuff, and I realize that sometimes you guys can't talk about everything as much as you'd like to.
Oh, yeah.
But thank you.
You sign NDAs for everything now.
Yeah, I have no doubt. But honestly, man, tremendous work, and all people have to do is reach back and rewatch, if they haven't watched it at all, that first season of Daredevil. Do you know, are they going to stay on Netflix, or are they going to transition to Disney Plus?
My understanding is that they're on Netflix for the foreseeable future.
Great. Okay, that's good, man. Because I'll be honest.
But I don't know anything more than anybody else. I don't have any inside knowledge. That's just what I've heard.
No, I hear you, man. And I'll be honest. I got a lot of catching up to do. I mean, I haven't finished the second season of Luke Cage or second season of Jessica Jones and some of these other shows and stuff. And now it's quality television. I mean, that's the great thing. It really feels like, and you've been in the TV business long enough maybe to compare. It really does seem like we're at. I mean, they call it peak TV for a reason. Mm-hmm. That really the writing and the television making is so exceptional now on so many levels. on so many shows.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think the level of talent and work and craftsmanship that's going into it is really impressive nowadays.
Well, I'm glad you're a part of it, man, and I'm glad that you guys are getting the gigs. You deserve it, and as always, continued success. Keep me in the loop.
Thank you so much, and same to you.
Oh, thanks, buddy. And seriously, I enjoyed your Ninjak run at Valiant, and again, I kick myself that we didn't talk about it earlier and stuff. But that's another great, significant run that's worth reviewing if you're a Valiant fan. Maybe, who knows? Maybe there's a Ninjak movie in your future.
Maybe, you never know.
That would be cool.
Yeah, but no, anytime. I'm here. You got my number, so just holler.
Absolutely, man. Well, as always, as I say, Greek to Greek. It's you, Iliopoulos, me, Doug Monkey, Peter Tomasi. It's a short list.
Yep.
It's a short list of us Greek men that are running around. I'm on the periphery. You guys are actually making the donuts. I just talk about the donuts. So
I prefer to eat the donuts.
As always, Chris, thanks very much, and I look forward to our next talk.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Out of the goodness of his heart, Chris Gage is interrupting his errands for this little insert because we finished our conversation. It's the next day, and I read a Marvel solicit for a Gwen Stacy book that he and Todd Nauck are doing. Am I right? It's Todd that's drawing the book, correct?
Yeah, Todd Nauck is drawing it. He's done a terrific job. He put some of his character sketches on Twitter, and they look great. And Adam Hughes is doing the covers.
Yeah, beautiful cover, man. That's what they used for the solicit, of course. Now, is this a one-shot or is it an ongoing?
My understanding is that it is a miniseries, although if it does well, there is a possibility for more.
That's awesome.
So, there you have it.
Well, there you go. Well, and we're getting the backstory of Gwen Stacy, which is interesting because obviously we only knew her from the perspective of Amazing Spider-Man and Peter Parker's story, and so, her father is Captain Stacy, the police captain. I don't know where in her high school career or younger does this story start.
Yeah, well, it starts. She's in high school. I can't say too much about it, but sort of, the elevator pitch is it's Veronica Mars meets like Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, Amazing Spider-Man. So, she is in high school. She went to high school with Harry Osborn, so he's a supporting character. She is, her father is a police captain. Her mother has passed away in some time in the past. And, Gwen is Gwen. She's precocious. She's smart. She's got a great scientific mind. And she's a go-getter. So she's helping out her dad in certain ways. And there are all kinds of characters the cool thing is we're getting to use characters from before readers like you and I met them. So, Jean DeWolf from the, Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man story, The Death of Jean DeWolf, spoiler alert, is a lieutenant at this point, and she works for Captain Stacy, as is Yuri Watanabe, who, was not only in the Spider-Man video game, but she is in the comics. And then there's the whole, crime situation of what was going on at the time. You had guys like the Crime Master, who was a Stan Lee, Steve Ditko villain who literally appeared one issue for the first appearance and was killed in the next issue. So there's a lot of sort of untapped material there. It's just, there's a lot of, it was surprising to me, to be perfectly honest, how little of Gwen's pre-Spider-Man existence has been explored in the past. And I think it's because she died in literally the early 70s, and it's not, the focus with Gwen was on like all these clones things that came up, but no one has ever really looked into her past and what was her life like before she went to Empire State University and met Pete. And it was we're going to be delving into that, exploring things like why does Captain Stacy walk with a cane, and how did he get that injury, and what's going on. So it's kind of a fun mix of, I keep going back to Veronica Mars because that sort of had that combination of high school and crime.
Yeah.
So
no, I think that's a great idea. and I'm glad you guys are pursuing it. I mean, that's fantastic and a great opportunity for you, and certainly a guy who's steeped in the Spider-Verse and everything, and we're now getting it from a pre-Amazing Fantasy 15 perspective. So that's really cool.
Well, not necessarily pre-Amazing Fantasy 15, but pre-Amazing Spider-Man 31, which is the first time Gwen appeared in the Spider-Man comics. So I mean, we are talking about a time when Spider-Man is on the scene, although just not for long. But the Fantastic Four exists, it's at the dawn of the age of heroes, as it were. And I do, without trying to make it like Marvel's, I want, of course, it's one of the all-time great comics. I want to try to give it that sort of feel so that, when an ordinary person, be it Gwen or Captain Stacy or Lieutenant DeWolf, comes face to face with somebody, who, may not be a like, for example, the Enforcers, a classic Spider-Man villain, but they're considered sort of like junior grade villains because they're not that big a challenge for Spider-Man. But for a normal person, the Ox is this gigantic guy who could literally tear you apart with his bare hands. And, I really am excited about getting that across of, like, there are these terrifying people emerging and these crazy people and crime lords and everything else, and what all is going on, and I think it's a very rich environment for telling stories.
That's excellent, man. No, I'm excited to see it. I think that, again, it just makes the Spider-Verse much more bigger, and also, again, it gives us a chance, and the way that Gwen has evolved as being an important character in today's continuity and stuff. It's great to look back. And so this is 616 Gwen, am I correct, or no?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is the mainstream Marvel Universe Gwen Stacy. It's not Spider-Gwen. She's got her own thing going on.
Yeah.
It's old school OG Gwen Stacy, original Gwen.
That's excellent, man. And, really thinking of, like, what Rucka is doing with the Lois Lane book, I think Gwen is a great civilian to focus on and give her that kind of spin, given her family background and, like you say, her own smarts, and why not put that to the test and have her, what does she do in the early Marvel universe? I think that's great, man. So, very cool. So, 5 issues to start on the arc?
I'm sorry?
5 issues to start on the arc?
Yeah, 5 issues to start with, yep.
Okay, excellent, man. So, Chris and Todd Nauck doing Gwen Stacy. All right, interesting
Todd's
insert.
Doing a terrific job. He's really excited about this, and he's he's drawn up all these character sketches, not just the ones that he's shown online, but others too. And I just turned in the first issue script. Excuse me. So hopefully he's going to be starting on that soon, and I'm really psyched to see where it goes.
That's excellent, man. All right, well, I'll let you get back to your chores. And this is
thank you.
This is running at the end of our interview. So thanks, man. Thanks for coming back on and filling in the blanks for us. So and we'll talk soon.
My pleasure.
There you go, Chris Gage. And wasn't he a sweetie to come back and give us the lowdown on Gwen Stacy? Very excited about that series. Very excited about Iron Man 2020, Arno Stark's adventures. Finally, as Iron Man. Ain't easy wearing the armor. I'm sure Arno's going to find that out the hard way. Well, when he and Dan Slott telling that story, and a hell of a lot more. It's great to have Chris back, and I hope you enjoyed today's conversation here on Word Balloon. Brought to you by Aftershock Comics. I talk about them because I like their books. I think they have really interesting concepts with great creators, and the combination makes for great products, great things to read, like Midnight Vista, Issue 3 is out from Elliot Ryall and Clara Meath. There's also Shoplifters Will Be Liquidated, which is kind of what if Judge Dredd worked for Amazon concept. Issue 2 is out from them. Wando's Bad Reception. It's all Wando solo writing and drawing. And issue 4 is out now this month from Aftershock. There's Matthew Klickstein's You Are Obsolete, issue 3. Matthew, coming up on Word Balloon, the next Aftershock creator, sitting in the hot seat, talking about his very interesting series, You Are Obsolete. There's the Rough Riders Complete series, which is a great steampunk adventure that Adam Glass and Pat Olive came up with. And they're represented in 3 complete arcs in the complete series. A great $39.99 book as it retails, but it's a great steampunk story with Theodore Roosevelt, Harry Houdini, Annie Oakley, Jack Johnson, a great turn-of-the-century team facing some pretty interesting monsters out there. Rough Riders, the complete series from Aftershock Comics. There's a lot more. Names like Donnie Cates and Marguerite Bennett and Tim Seeley and Cullen Bunn, Phil Hester and Ryan Brown, all putting out amazing product from Aftershock Comics, worthy of your attention. Go to their website, find out for yourself. You'll find full story descriptions, preview art, and the diamond codes on how to order Aftershock books through your local comic shop at AftershockComics.com. Thanks again for listening. I hope you have a great weekend. Next week, holiday week, Thanksgiving week, more Word Balloon to come. We don't take breaks for the holidays. No, sorry. You guys need something to listen to, and women, and I am happy to provide excellent comic book conversation, pop culture talk. Did you listen to Bernie Capel from Love Boat and Get Smart? I'm still pinching myself that I had the chance to talk to Bernie, just the last Word Balloon episode. Also, we did a flashback talking to Dave Gibbons. Dave reached out. Fantastic, man. I should mention that this morning. I got a nice message from him going, John, let's talk in the new year. Okay, sounds good. I know it's the holidays. Everybody's busy in the holidays, and it's going to be a little bit of a challenge getting everybody to sit down for December conversations. But don't worry. We'll manage. We'll crank out good product for you in December, and of course we'll do it in 2020 and into next year. 2019's been a fantastic year, and thanks for being on the ride with me and enjoying some of these great conversations. I intend to bring you more in the days and weeks ahead. So have a nice weekend. Good luck next week on Thanksgiving, but we'll be there with new product and new conversations to share with you and get you through the holiday week. Until next time, Word Balloon is a copyright feature of Shaky Productions. Copyright 2019.